30 years ago, the people of the Churchrock community and other communities all the way into Arizona were subjected to the largest peacetime accidental release of radioactive contaminated materials in the history of the United States. Although this toxic release was hardly mentioned in the national press at the time and barely existed as a ripple in the memory of the United States, it will never be forgotten by the Navajo people and those non-Navajos in downstream communities who still worry today about potential impacts of this tragic accident. Now, I want to read the proclamation, and then I'll go ahead and sign it. Navajo Nation Proclamation, proclaiming July 16, 2009 as Uranium Legacy Remembrance and Action Day to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Churchrock uranium tailings spill and 60 years of uranium mining impacts in Navajo country and beyond. Whereas, on July 16, 1979, an earthen dam at the United Nuclear Corporation uranium mill tailings facility collapsed.
Morning shift from 8 o'clock on up started showing up, and I started hearing people mentioning, did you see the break in the dam? Did you see the break? I didn't know what they were talking about until
releasing 1,100 tons of radioactive tailings and 94 million gallons of toxic wastewater into the Puerco River.
And I saw a huge gaping hole in the dam there.
And whereas the Churchrock uranium tailings spill contaminated the river for at least 80 miles, affecting the communities of Pinedale, Churchrock, Gallup, Sayato, and Manuelito in New Mexico.
94 million gallons of radioactive water through the unnamed wash here, meeting up with the Puerco wash, which runs right through downtown Gallup, all the way to Holbrook, all the way to Winslow. Probably made its way down to the Little Colorado River.
And Lawton, Hawk, and the Newlands area, New Sanders and Chambers in Arizona. And whereas the spill is the largest release of radioactive waste by volume in U.S. history and ranks second only to the Chernobyl nuclear reactor accident in total radiation released. And whereas many Navajo residents at the river valley lost livestock in the days after the spill.
But it was for more than 20 years when the mine was operating that the mine was releasing untreated water through this Puerco wash.
Others stopped gathering herbs from the riverbanks, and a few were burned by the acidic wastewater. And whereas the Puerco River was also contaminated by discharges of untreated or poorly treated uranium mine water and municipal sewage for a period spanning parts of 3 decades.
And nitric acid to leach the uranium out of the ore. The only thing that they take out of the ore is the uranium, and all the other radioactive and heavy metals, contaminants remain in the ore and go back into here.
And uranium levels in groundwater below the stream bed in the Churchrock area was increased by up to 67 times over normal levels. And whereas, despite the widespread impacts of the tailings spill and of mine dewatering in communities downstream from Churchrock in the 1970s and 1980s, federal and state governments declined to fund and conduct a comprehensive health study among the populations in the Puerco River Valley in both states.
Affecting my eyes. My eyes is always red. I got arthritis all over my body.
And whereas, beginning in 2003, Churchrock chapter and community-based groups secured private funding to conduct environmental monitoring that demonstrated mining-related contamination was still present in residential areas near mining and milling operations, more than 20 years after the last mines closed.
Big tailings dump, 3.5 million tons of low-level radioactive waste in this area that is going to be there forever.
And whereas, beginning in 2004, community-based groups collaborated with universities to conduct a targeted health study in 20 chapters at the Eastern Navajo Agency, the preliminary results of which have been reported to the Navajo Nation and indicate that long-term exposure to uranium from living in close proximity to abandoned mines increases an individual's risk of kidney disease and diabetes.
There are going to be very difficult decisions that society, these communities will have to make.
And whereas the Navajo Nation has asked Congress to appropriate $500 million to help remediate and restore more than 500 uranium mining sites, scores of homes contaminated with mine wastes, and dozens of water sources polluted with uranium that are located throughout Navajo country. Yet the federal government has allocated only a few $1 million in a new funding from existing agency budgets to address the Navajo uranium legacy.
I went to a lot of meetings for the uraniums like you guys put up. These Navajos, I don't know, they haven't done nothing yet.
And whereas, in response to the threat of new uranium mining proposed in Churchrock and Crown Point chapters, and around Mount Taylor, a sacred mountain of the Navajo and Pueblo peoples, the Navajo Nation Council adopted the Diné Natural Resources Protection Act on April 19, 2005, prohibiting uranium mining and processing in Navajo country. And whereas the Multicultural Alliance for a Safe Environment, with support from Churchrock and Coyote Canyon chapters and other organizations, is holding a 30th anniversary commemoration of the Churchrock uranium tailings spill to remember and honor the Diné communities that were affected by the largest release of radioactive waste in U.S. history, and to reaffirm the Navajo Nation's ban on uranium mining and processing. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Dr. Joe Shirley Jr., President of the Navajo Nation, hereby proclaim July 16, 2009, as Uranium Legacy Remembrance and Action Day for the purpose of informing the people of the United States of America and of the world that we, the Diné, will never forget the devastation that uranium mining and processing has wrought on the health, safety, and natural resources of our nation, and that we will continue to work to restore our health, lands, and water to their natural conditions to return harmony and balance to our relationship with our sacred mother, the earth. I further hereby proclaim that the Navajo Nation reasserts its call to the federal government and private industry to appropriate the necessary financial resources to undertake and complete within the next decade a comprehensive action plan to resolve the uranium legacy throughout the United States toward the goals of accomplishing full reclamation of abandoned mines and mills, restoring lands and waters damaged by uranium mill tailings disposal sites, replacing contaminated homes and water supplies, conducting health studies in communities impacted by mining, and fully compensating uranium workers and their family members and community members living near uranium sites for their illnesses and disabilities. I further hereby proclaim that the Navajo Nation reaffirms its commitment to implement and enforce the Diné Natural Resources Protection Act to prevent further harm to our people and our resources from uranium development in Navajo country. And I call on all federal and state permitting agencies to respect the Navajo Nation's sovereign uranium ban by declining to issue permits for new mines and mills within Navajo country. I further hereby recognize and extend the Navajo Nation's deepest appreciation to the many Diné individuals, communities, and organizations, and the many non-Navajo individuals and organizations who have worked tirelessly for 30 years to study the effects of the tailings spill and uranium mining in Navajo country, and who have continually sought and demanded justice for those who have been adversely affected by the uranium legacy. Proclaim the 16th day of July, 2009, Dr. Joe Shirley Jr., President of the Navajo Nation.
With all the new uranium mining companies wanting to come back to the Navajo Nation, including Mount Taylor, which is not in the Navajo Nation, is the Navajo Nation ban on uranium mining forever?
I'd like to believe it is forever, but I think as once all of the tailings and all of the contamination has been cleaned up, I believe that the leadership would be willing to talk about the uses of uranium.
So
and possibly what we might could do with it. But then one of the things that I use as president and the leader of my nation, if they can find a cure for cancer that the uranium causes, certainly I think we would be more amenable to talking about uranium.
So what is the Navajo Nation's stance on new mining or uranium processing on Navajo Indian country?
We don't want any more of it. I mean, over 500 mines are throughout Navajo land. Much of it hasn't been cleaned up. We're still asking for resources to come to bear to help us clean it up. As long as these mines, the tailings, are not cleaned up, we're very adamant against any more mining of uranium on Navajo land, on what we call Navajo country, Indian country.
Okay, thank you, President. I have one more question. This is for a project by some youth in Albuquerque called The Price You Pay. And so we're working on several films, short film series. And so right now, I just want to ask you if there's any words you have to the youth, to the next generation, especially those of us who are involved. We're trying to help recruit, but then I was wondering if you have words directly to all the youth, even the youth that don't know what's going on, the youth who are not involved. Would you please say something to them?
Certainly. I think that's where it begins, to help self, to help families, to help communities, and certainly in our case to help the Navajo Nation. It begins with involvement. It begins with taking action. First praying about it, then talking about it, soliciting support, talking with the nation's leadership, and talking with the U.S. government leadership, the powers that be that are out there. That's where it begins, with involvement, taking action. And I want to encourage all of our youth that are out there, those that are involved, thank you for being involved. That's how it's done. And those who are just kind of standing by, maybe, get involved. We need all the help that we can get. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.